Good evening, everyone. So, today we will learn about the structure and functions of the basic tissues of the body. Especially, this is covered under veterinary anatomy is concerned. So, very briefly, we'll go through as many of you have already learned this thing. However, this is a revision. And types of the animal tissue are varieties of the tissues are there. Then the blood is one of the tissue, bone is another tissue, epithelial cells are the tissues, cartilage is another part of the tissue, adipose tissue is the one, nervous tissue, muscle tissue. Then there are many type of the connective tissues are there in the body. So what's a tissue then? It's a group of cells which have similar in origin, structure and function, and they are together and they are called as the tissues. Very tissue. So in general, the tissue means a collection of similar type of the cells. Then it's a group of cells which perform specialized activity in the body. So the word tissue comes from the old French verb meanings to live, means it's one of the weaving type of the network. The study of tissue is called as histology, and abnormal tissue study is called as histopathology. In plants, tissues are divided into three types: vascular, glandular, ground and epidermal, whereas the animal have got the very special type of the tissues, and they are classified according to the structures what they have got in different parts of the body. So the fundamental types of the tissues are four types. The number one is the human tissue. Number uh, is the epithelial tissues are the most superficial tissues, followed by the muscular tissues. Beneath the skin, there are muscular tissues are there. Then, apart from this one, the nervous tissues, and there are many type of the connective tissues are there. We will deal the connective tissues separately. Whereas in case of the plants, tissues are divided into only three types. That's vascular, ground and epidermal only. So here it is a very remarkable classification of the animal tissues, just like what we have classified as epithelial, connective, muscular and nervous. But once again, the epithelial tissues are classified into squamous tissues, then the cuboidal type of the tissues, then columnar type of the tissues, ciliated tissues, glandular tissues. These are all the epithelial tissues which are adhering to either mucous membrane or to the skin. Whereas the connective tissue is the one which is classified into the areolar tissues like tendon and ligament, whereas the adipose tissues, then the skeletal connective tissues are bone and cartilage. Whereas the fluid is also in the tissues like the blood and also the limbs. Whereas the muscular tissues, once again, they are classified into skeletal muscles and smooth muscles. So the skeletal muscles, apart from skeletal muscles, the smooth muscles are divided into the cardiac tissues, which are very specialized type of the tissues. And lastly, the nervous tissues, of course, lot of neurons, nerves, and other things are there. So these are all a very brief classification of the different tissues in a nutshell. Then what's an epithelial type of the tissue? So epithelial tissue or epithelium covers the surfaces of organs, including the skin. Epi means above, thelium means cell. So that the tracheal tissues, the reproductive tract, and the digestive tract's inner lining is called as the epithelial type of the tissue. And the function of these tissues is the protection. It creates a barrier that helps protect the underlying organs from friction and injury. The main function of epithelial tissues is protection, whereas another part of the work of these tissues is secretion. It also has roles in absorbing water and the nutrients. Then, apart from this one, they also secrete enzymes or hormones and removal of the waste material from the body. So, these are all the parts of the epithelial tissues with a function in very brief manner. All body glands are formed from ingrowths of the epithelium. Most of the body organs are originated from the epithelial tissues. Whereas, whenever certain diseases are there, then these epithelial tissues are affected, just like the foot and mouth disease. It's a epitheliotropic virus. Whereas the lumpy skin disease is also another epitheliotropic virus which affect the skin and form the nodules. Whereas in foot and mouth disease, the foot and mouth epithelial tissues are involved. Apart from this one, the dermatological disorders also affecting the skin like eczema, psoriasis, or sometimes the rashes, sometimes the ulcers, sometimes the different type of the wounds in the inner organs are also called as the damage to the epithelial tissue. And sometimes the cancer develops from epithelial tissues is called as the carcinoma. Any type of the cancer, including the gastric cancers or the hollow organ cancer, is called as the carcinoma. Then, epithelial cells in airways are also responsible for the asthma, which is characterized by the inflammation of the airways that leads to shortness of the breath or difficulty in breath or sometimes choking or leading to asphyxia. Sometimes the complete stoppage of the respiration or sometimes it's also called as the choking. So here you can see the photographs of the three type of the epithelial tissues. One is squamous cells, then cuboidal cells, the columnar cells, and also the ciliated epithelium. It's a special feature. So the epithelial tissue can be further classified as simple epithelial cells. Then, depending upon the complexity of these organs, it is also called as the compound epithelial cells. A simple epithelial cells is made up of a single layer of cell and it is divided into four types. As I have already informed, the squamous cells, cuboidal cells, columnar epithelium, or they are also called as the ciliated epithelium. So cilia are the small hair-like structures which are very common in the airways to prevent the aerosols or dust entering inside the respiratory tract. That's why they are very specially prepared or made for the different type of the tissues. For example, in intestine, the columnar cells are there, which makes the food to be absorbed as part of the nutrient requirement of the body. Whereas the squamous epithelium is composed of epithelial cells that are particularly flat cells, which are wide and taller and appear polygonal in structure. This is the structure of the flat epithelial cells, which are also called as squamous epithelial cells. So, it gives a very smooth, low friction surface which allows easy movement of fluid over it. So the most popular examples of this thing is the heart. It has got the simple epithelial cells, squamous epithelial cells, blood vessels, lymphatic vessels, alveolar cells, and also the conjunctiva of the eye. It's also called as the squamous epithelial cells. And function of this type of the specialized cells is to permit adequate diffusion, osmotic and filtration. So the second type of the cells or the epithelium is the cuboidal epithelium. As the name indicates, they are having the cuboidal structure of a single layer of the cube-like cells, which you can see in the particular photographs, which have large spherical central nuclei. These are all the central nuclei. So they have got the cube shape. You know, the cube is a cylindrical type of the mass, and cubular epithelium are also called as the glandular epithelium, as it is present in the simple glands, and they secrete the materials which are required for different parts of the body components and functions. So these are all called as the cuboidal cells, and they store the secretory materials. They may be an enzyme or sometimes the acid or sometimes the mucus and many more type of the things are secretory cells. Whereas the third one is columnar epithelial cells. As you see from this particular figure, columnar epithelium do have regular structures and have got the tiny columnar shape, and they have got a single layer of the cell. The comparison of this one is columnar epithelium is taller than its width. You can see here lining of the GIT cells, which is required for the absorption, and they secrete lot of mucus, such as mucus secreting epithelium cells. They are called as the goblet cell. So whenever there is a diarrhea, etc., then these cells are being affected. So these are all called as the columnar epithelial cell. Whereas the next cells are the ciliated epithelial cells, and it is a thin tissue that has hair-like structure on it. These are called as the very specialized cells, and these hairs are called as the cilia, move back and forth to help move particulars of our body, and we find ciliated epithelial tissue in our respiratory tract and the fallopian tubes of the woman or an animal, because this is very much required for the movement of both ovum and also the spermatozoa. So the location of these cells is respiratory tract and also the fallopian tube, etc. Then function is number one, secrete mucus and movement of the mucus. Both are the ciliated epithelial cell. And upper respiratory tract, these cells do have the function of eradicating the dust and other things, which are unwanted materials not to enter the respiratory tract. Whereas these are all the simple type of the cells, whereas the compound epithelial cells do contain multiple layers. Usually, they are divided into two types. One is stratified epithelium, and another one is the transitional epithelium. Whereas the stratified epithelium can be divided into stratified squamous epithelium, then stratified cuboidal epithelium, then stratified columnar epithelium. Very similar to that of the earlier epithelial cell classification. So, what says stratified epithelial cells means these are composed of more than one layer of epithelial cells, whereas the stratified squamous epithelium is a type of tissue found covering the line parts of the body. Then, in this tissue, cells are flattened, joined tightly together, and they are all stopped together. That's why they are called as the stratified squamous epithelial cell, where these are found in skin and also in the esophagus, then mouth, then in the female reproductive organ, starting from the vagina, cervix, etc. So these stratified squamous epithelial cells are very much required for the body, which is present in outmost layer of the skin and the smooth tissues like the esophagus and vagina. Here you can see the structure of stratified squamous epithelium with different layers. So here you can see the horny layer, then squamous layer, then intermediate layer, then germinative layer, especially the columnar cells are there, secretory cells are also present, and there is a basement membrane, just like the pizza, what you are going to eat, just like that analogy you can give. So here the stratified squamous epithelial cell, basement membrane, and laminae proprio are there here. Then the stratified squamous epithelial cells provide protection against the mechanical stress. Then second one is the chemical abrasions, then pathogens. Then apart from this one, the desiccation and even radiation is also they are going to provide. So the keratinized epithelial cells are present on the surface of the skin, which blocks the harmful radiation and prevents the exposure to internal tissues and organs to the radiation hazards. Whereas the second type of the cells are the transitional epithelial cells, and this is composed of multi-layers of the cells. Usually, these do contain 4 to 6 layers. So, these cells are called as transitional because they can undergo a change in their shape and also structure. So, for example, these are also called as the urothelium because they always lie with the urinary tract. Then the urethra, urinary bladder, and renal calyxus cells. So it's a variable in appearance. There is no uniformity structure. In relaxed state, it is look like a stratified cuboidal epithelium, while stretched, the cells become squamous cell. So they are usually stretchable, especially found in the urethra, the ducts, then urinary bladder, and renal calyxes. So these are the transitional epithelial cells. Why they are called as the transitional? Because they can undergo a change in their structure and also shape depending upon the functions. Hence, they are called as the transitional epithelial cells. Here you can see that they have got different type of the layers, just like the upper layer is umbrella cells, then the middle layer is polyhedral cells, or they are also called as the intermediate cells, and the last layer is the columnar or cuboidal cells. So this is a characteristic feature of the urinary system, maybe the urethra, then also the urinary bladder and the renal calyxes. So these are all such cells are stretchable in nature. And the second one is the connective tissue. Connective means connects and separate groups of the other tissue. Of course, there may be similar type of the tissues, but they may be differing in functions, and sometimes it will join the different type of the tissue or similar type of the tissues also. They are found in between all the tissues and organs in the body. So, what is the function of the connective tissues is it is a gel type of the material that surrounds most of the cells. So, it is a connective tissue except for lymph and blood. So it also contains the fibers which are long, narrow, proteinous in nature. So the connective tissues. As the name indicates, they connect two type of the tissues. So the structure of the connective tissue varies from place to place, and the fiber-like structures are called as the collagenase, which bind bones to tissue. For example, the skeletal muscles are bound to the bones by the elastic fibers, which allow organs like the lungs to move. So, or reticular fiber, which provide physical support to cells. So, you may be wondering how many type of the tissues are there. 10 raised to 14 cells are present in the body, and each forms different type of the tissue, starting from the squamous cells, then also the transitional cells, and many more. And connective tissues are also one which allow oxygen to diffuse from blood vessel into the cell. Usually, the blood vessel is in close proximity with that of the different tissue cells. So oxygenation and also the carbon dioxide excretion has to be taken place. So about 1 in 10 people have a disorder in the connective tissue either in one or the other way. And some connective tissue disorders include sarcomas. Carcinomas are the one which are simple connective tissue, simple cell tissue. Whereas another syndrome is called as the Marfan syndrome, lupus, and scurvy, which is a vitamin C deficiency that leads to fragile connective tissue. So these are also important part of the tissues, whereas the collagen is present and bind different types of the body cells, and the fibers are the strongest and most abundant all of the connective tissue fibers. And the collagen fibers are fibrous proteins and are secreted into the extracellular space, and they provide high tensile strength to the matrix. Their elastic fibers are long, thin fibers that form branching network in extracellular matrix. So they help the connective tissue to stretch and recoil. Whereas the reticular fibers are short, fine collagenous fibers that are that can branch extensively to form the delicate networks. So these are all different type of the fibrinous tissues. So fibers can be collagenous, which bound bones to the tissue, and elastic fibers allow organs like lungs to expand and collapse, or reticular fiber which provide physical support to many of the cells to form the base. And the connective tissues are also allowing the oxygen to diffuse from blood vessels into the cells. And about 1 in 110 people have disorder involving the connective tissues like, and many type of the tissues are also involved in different type of the actions. For example, the major functions of the connective tissues include binding and supporting. For example, the bone is a hard tissue, then a muscle is a soft type of the tissue. So both need to be bound for the movement and many more structures. Then protection also from the damage, then insulation effect, then storing reserve fuel or the fat, and transporting substances within the body. So these are all the major functions of the connective tissues, which always do have the function of connection in between different type of the tissues in the body. So here you can see the diagrammatic representation of the connective tissue, like the connective tissues are having the connection between the cartilage like hyaline cartilage and also the elastic cartilage. Then apart from this one, the fibrocartilages are also there. They are all little bit tougher tissues when compared to the other type of the tissues. So whereas the connective tissues do have loose, areolar, reticular, and adipose tissues. So adipose tissues are also which are present beneath the skin or in between the organ, abdominal cavity, or the hollow space. And whereas the dense connective tissues are regular in shape, but they are having lot of elasticity, whereas sometimes they are also irregular in shape. Then the bone is also a connective tissue, but it is having the compact and also the spongy type of the bones are there. And apart from this one, the blood is also one of the very good example of connective tissues, even though it is not having a clear cut structure, but it is present or moving in the blood vessels throughout the lifetime of an animal till the heart beats. Then the muscular tissues are classified into different types in the body as they have got special ability to shorten or contract in order to produce the movement of body parts or the organs. Sometimes they are voluntary and they are called as the skeletal muscles, whereas the involuntary muscles are also called as the smooth muscles, then also the cardiac muscle fiber have got the very specialized type of the autonomous functioning capacity. So the skeletal muscles anchors tendons to bones and allows the body to move from one place to another place. Whereas the cardiac tissues are the specialized type of the tissues and they always be in function till the animal take a place during the womb and till last breath. They are functioning and it's from the heart and contracts the blood or contract the heart to pump blood to the entire organ. That's why the cardiac muscles are very special type of muscles. Whereas the smooth muscles are present throughout the body, maybe the hollow organ, intestines. So here also one of the important movement is called as the peristalsis, which pushes the undigested material forward, especially in case of the digestive tract and also found in other organs like the blood vessels and the uterus and also the bladder. And apart from this one also it is present in the male reproductive organ, female reproductive organ, almost all the body organs, especially these smooth muscle cells like the esophagus, the heart, the pulmonary or the lungs, trachea, and uterus, bladder, stomach, and many more type of the smooth muscles are there. And most of the time, the smooth muscles are involuntary. They cannot contract their own, but as per the body signal is arised, they are going to move. They are not in the control of the animal being. Then the fourth is the nervous tissue, one of the well-grown tissues in case of the human being. So it is very well protected inside the skull, a bone structure, and it is elongated as spinal cord and lot of peripheral nerves are there, which are all parts of the entire nervous system just like the digestive system, nervous system, etc., cardiovascular system, and so many type of the system. The nervous tissue is part of the nervous system. So it is made up of the neurons, which are the nerve cells, and also the neuroglia, which are cells help nerve impulse travel, whereas the neurons are the unique type of the cells which are present in the brain and they are very useful in processing the signal, maybe electrical signal, etc., then do respond to the incoming stimuli. So the nervous tissue is grouped into four types: gray matter and white matter in the brain, and nerves and ganglia in the peripheral nerves, or which starts from the spinal cord. So here you can see the main difference between gray and white matter is that axons of the neurons in gray matter are unmyelinated. So myelin is also a specialized type of tissue which need and protect the neurons from the damage. So it is a fatty substance that insulates neurons and is vital for nervous system functioning. And here you can see a representation of a neuron, and all these are called as this one. Entire body is called as the soma. Then nucleus is there, axons are there, then dendrites are present. And apart from this one, the axon, then myelin sheath is there, which is covering the nerves and makes them the cushioning effect. So entire nervous cell itself, it will call as the, especially the master cells. Then function of the nervous system, lot of functions are there, whereas we do always trust in memory and learning is the function of the nervous system, then control of the involuntary organs, then voluntary movement also require the central involuntary nervous system, whereas the regulates and controls body functions. Then apart from this one, the regulates and transmits nerve impulses, then supports and protects impulse generating neuron. These are all the specially derived cells in the body, and the nervous tissue is a part of is a this is consisting of different parts of the nervous system. So that's about the today's class, which is about the different types of the tissues in a nutshell. And in future classes, we'll go about the individual type of the tissue, starting from the basic tissues to the complicated connective tissue. Thanks a lot. Have a great day. Bye.